All right, back as I promised, Newsroom is continuing. I still have Eric, Martin, and Nancy with me here in studio. Professor, just a quick feeling, your thoughts on fake news and social media. It was very big in this election. I think we should have learned from the US election and how it played out. But your feelings and your thoughts on the fake news and how we as media can play a role in sort of making sure that we are taming fake news. We've talked, Google has come out, Facebook has come out, even Twitter to some extent also came out and said these are the measurements as social media that we're putting in place to make sure that fake news is being tamed. Here in Kenya, as media houses, how can we play our role in that?
One, it's being aware that it exists and being able to always verify information that comes to newsrooms, irrespective of the source of that information. I think it was evident from, last year's election coverage that, even some of the sources that were deemed to be very trustworthy were proponents of fake news and, and propaganda as well. So being aware that, yes, fake news exists, which then means that you verify whatever information comes across. We saw instances where, because of the push to be the first one to tell the story, particularly on the digital platforms, that some of the legacy media houses were also proponents of that fake news and, going back later on to pull down some of the stories that they had because they had since established that some of the facts were, were distorted. So that's one thing. But then two, providing up-to-date information. I think fake news thrives a lot in a context where, there's a lot of uncertainty and, people are in despair, so they're looking for news that confirms, their points of view or confirms their, whatever it is that they would want to believe. But when you have up-to-date current information that's credible, then you then are able to fight, a lot of that fake news coming to bear. A lot is being studied around that. What are the ways in which then we, we fact check, we ensure that we are providing credible information. So always ensuring that even as you be the first ones to break the stories, that there is a team that works within the media houses that does, fact-checking of various things that you are
Eric,
pushing.
Sometimes as journalists we're guilty of where you want to be the first. And we were taught in communication classes, factuality is the first thing that you need to do, but we tend to forget that and we want to be the first rather.
Exactly. Yeah, I know there has always been this rush to break news on social media, whereby a journalist has just received information before checking the facts, before verifying, then the story is already out there, then start spreading, then after that, then you see the media house pulling down the story. But what I will say is that at least there's a precedent that actually has been set by the European Union, and I think there is a law that was passed in Germany either yesterday or 2 days ago, whereby if there is a site that has been suspected to have published fake news, then social media platform, that is Facebook, Google, WhatsApp, will be notified so that they pull down that site and then they block it. So that means that is going to be a lesson that Kenyans must start learning. Because again, we've only used that kind of the anarchy and lack of regulation on social media for us to spread fake news. So I believe based on what has been done, I think the Kenyan bloggers and anybody who wants to use social media and blogs to spread fake news, I think they should know that their days are numbered. Because what they have always done, most of these sites actually are not even registered in Kenya, they are registered in other countries. So given that other countries have already taken the step of ensuring that they crack down on fake news, it's going to catch up with us. So I think as a way forward, the Kenyan bloggers and those who want to use social media, they must start learning to know that the law will soon catch up with them. Even if in Kenya we do not have that kind of law, but given that it's happening out there and anybody can raise alert to the to Google or Facebook or Twitter to tell them that I think this site is notorious for spreading fake news, they should never use it on the platform. And I think that is going to help us a lot.
Martin?
Yes, the absence of such a law does not mean that we need to go on a spree of misinforming Kenyans. But it's important that media houses ensure that the verification of news is key. Even when there's this business of about scooping each other on stories that are coming up, it's important that we verify. Editors must be very keen and alert in terms of verifying information before it's put out there, because it becomes very embarrassing when you have to the next day you have to retract what you potentially had given to your viewers or your readers. So it is something that this is an issue that we must take. But also moving forward, I think the ICT ministry as well, or in government, they should also be thinking in terms of how a law would come up in terms of ensuring that there is proper regulation on social media usage and how that can be helped, because this is something that can cause a lot of panic or even create a crisis in a country, whereas there is absolutely nothing in the first place. So it's something that needs to be looked at with all the stakeholders involved, the media and everybody who is involved in the social media world.
Professor, the whole 2017 was just not a political year. We saw the crisis within our health sector. A lot of the Supreme Court, which was still part of the election, but even away from it, the education as well. How would you grade our coverage in those other headlines?
The doctors were on strike for 100 days. And that was long and sustained coverage. The nurses then also went on strike.
Almost 3 months.
Almost 3 months. So within the health sector, there was a crisis. The coverage was quite detailed in terms of, keeping us up to date with what was happening. The only challenge is that because of politics and elections, that seemed to have been lost, in the coverage, that people tended to pay a lot more attention to the political stories rather than the issues around healthcare. There were some very good health stories coming out of, different papers. The Nation, The Standard had very, very good health stories, health segments, and that's one of the highlights of the 2017 coverage. And just being able to situate health as an important area of reporting was a big thing. What seemed to have been lacking was the depth in that kind of coverage. I think for the longest time we did not even understand what is it that the doctors were agitating for as they went on strike. And there were all manner of conflicting reports about, is it just a pay hike? Is it the working conditions? There was just a lot of debate around that. So much so that many of the doctors then went onto social media to be able to say, this is why we are agitating for changes in the health sector. That kind of depth was missing. And I think for me, going forward, there is still a lot of untold stories around the health sector in this country, and I'm hoping that when all these election and political issues then go on a lull, that we can be able to cover some of those stories in depth. I think the impact of the crisis in the health sector, when you have doctors on strike for 100 days and then quickly followed by nurses for 3 months, there's a story there that needs to be told, which it's time now to investigate. And what that then means is that there is now need for media houses to invest in investigative reporting, where these stories, acknowledging that these stories, for you to cover these stories in depth, even with the education crisis, this is not a story that you can tell in a day. There's a new curriculum in place, which several of the stakeholders, parents, for example, have no idea how this plays out and the kind of trajectory that it is taking. Some of these stories would require a lot more time, a lot more investment in the kind of journalists that you assign to those stories, the kind of economic resources and the time that you attend to them, so that it's not just covering a press conference of various stakeholders saying, we agree with this and we don't, but going in depth to be able to analyze that. But also, then, collaborative reporting, in the sense that as media, understanding that, our capacity to be able to cover those stories goes to a certain extent. But for you to be able to unravel, for example, the education situation, working with people in the education sector, bringing them to participate in that discourse and inform your kind of coverage would be the way to go.
Martin, as head of media relations at the National Assembly, I'd really love to hear your thoughts. And you could comment on the whole issue of the other headlines, but because of time, I'd really love to hear your thoughts on international media, because it was also something that also played out large in the last election in 2017, and how Kenya was portrayed outside there.
Well, in terms of being portrayed out there, it's different. I mean, the fact that we went through these elections without the chaos that were being anticipated was a plus for us, and what the international media had expected did not happen. So it is, in terms of coverage for me, I think we did well. But in terms of how the situation, like what Prof has been talking about, the coverage of various sectors, like the education, the health, and all these other sectors, there is need for media to invest in terms of special projects. I remember when was in the newsroom, we used to have a special projects desk, which would go behind the story of whatever story, the crisis that we have, and they will bring you out the inside story and what it all portends. I think that media needs to invest in that. We should not leave stories at the face value of this has been said and this has happened. We need to go in behind the story, like the ones on the health crisis. We also need to, like what is happening in the country in terms of the road carnage. Mm-hmm. There's a lot that is happening. Why are we losing lives? Why, even when we have all these measures, knee-jerk reactions by NTSA, we are still losing lives. People are dying. In the middle of CBD now, a bus can roll in there. That's unacceptable. Especially, I was in Dar es Salaam last month, and I was impressed by something that I saw there. There is in terms of the public transport sector, the Jakaya Kikwete, when he was president, he introduced a lane where you'll only have public transport that is passing, the special buses which use that lane, so that you decongest in terms of ensuring that there's no jam within the city. In Dar es Salaam, you rarely find that kind of thing. They call it Mwendo Kasi. You have buses which are run by government, and they are the ones which take people along with a special lane. If you drive on that lane, there are very serious consequences. Your car, you have your wheels removed, and you're paralyzed. So if we can create a proper transport system for the CBD, for instance, we will have absolutely no such kind of things happening.
Eric, I'll let you have the last say.
Yes, I'll say number one, what we need to do is that we need to go back to the special projects like Tua is saying, and this now goes to the weekend editions, be it television, radio, or newspapers, that the weekend edition must now be repackaged so that we can now have enough space for special projects, and even Monday papers should also have enough space for special projects, so we are able to revisit some of these stories that actually break during the week. What we've seen is that we've continuously used daily reports, what has happened, like in a press conference or an event, like what has happened right now is just like a news, breaking news, then everybody forget about it. But I think now is now upon those who are doing investigative pieces or special projects now to go down and come up with a comprehensive story about this road carnage and any other issue we're talking about. Be it in the health sector, actually right now there is a lot of stories that need to be told. Right now, if you look at President Uhuru's the Big Four agenda he talked about, he talked of healthcare. He's talking about universal access to healthcare. How are we going to achieve that? And I think now that's where now the serious journalism needs to come to play so that we can now interrogate this. How is the president going to achieve that? I've just seen a press statement from Kenyatta National Hospital where they are saying that we are no longer going to give maternity services to women who are not enrolled by the NHIF. Then if you are going to enroll in NHIF, how are you going to go about it? So that means that now that's where now the media is coming. It's supposed now to help the public to understand some of these changes that are happening in the health sector, so that people are supposed to so that people understand that. The same way in education, we are talking about changing the curriculum. We are talking about changing the whole and reforming the whole education system. What does it actually portend to those who are in school and even those who will join school thereafter? How is it going to affect our lives? Again, that is now also calls for some serious journalism, how I call it, so that we're able to break it down and cover every aspect of it, so that when in future we can be able now to sit down and say that as the media we did our work. Because if you look at the information and the statement that we get from the Ministry of Education, it seems the Cabinet Secretary, Dr. Fred Matiang'i, consults himself, and he proposed to have consulted everybody in within the industry. Because if parents are complaining, unions are complaining, associations are complaining, so that means that Matiang'i must have consulted himself. So that means there is an issue that needs to be revisited by the media so that the public is able to understand what we're talking about.
Okay, thank you so much. Eric Odor, the Secretary General of the Kenyan Union Journalist, Professor Nancy Buka, Communication Lecturer at the Aga Khan University, and Martin Mutua, Head of Media Relations at the National Assembly. Thank you so much for your time, everyone.